So now we're ready to install the app. So we can run, well, first we have to activate our Conda environment, activate Tethys, and then we need to run Tethys install. This time without the D option because we're installing in production. Okay, so we've run into an issue that I was aware of and kind of left in there on purpose because often when you're doing installation on production, there are things that you encounter that you don't encounter when you're in development. And it often has to do with the app being installed for the first time. So if you just looked at these error messages, you might be a little confused because it says the app or extension you specified does not exist. And then the command was aborted. And you can see that it didn't load the app when it says Tethys app's loaded up here, Earth Engine isn't listed. This is really confusing because we're installing the app. But this issue arose out of how the app evolved as we were developing it. If you scroll up a little bit, you'll see the reason why the app wasn't loaded. There was this attribute error risen, and it occurred in the GEE methods.py file on line 32. So this is something that, because the app was installed when we added this functionality, it didn't pick up on this exception occurring when you installed it. So a lot of times installing the app fresh can give you new insight on some issues that you didn't expect. To get around this, let's go open this file in a text editor and I'll show you what to do. First let me clear and we'll go vim, and we're actually in this directory, so Tethys app / Earth Engine GEE/methods. And if you go down to line 32, showing it here, you can see it's this scope. So essentially what it does is if the service account is defined, and remember this is coming from our variables. So if we look up here, we have our variables. So we haven't defined these yet because the app hasn't been installed yet. So if that's not defined, then it's going to drop down to this else. And this is what it does to try and use the local credentials. So when you essentially do the Google Earth Engine authenticate command and it uses your local credentials. So, which we haven't done and we don't really want to do on our production server. So we could either log in temporarily with that and then remove it after the fact, or we could handle this a little bit differently. Since we don't really have any credentials and it comes into this block and there's really this isn't set up very well. What we ought to do is instead change this to something like this. So I'm going to delete these lines and then get into insert mode. And I'm going to instead just print a warning. Or actually, do we have our log available? Let's see. OS, we do. There's a logger here. So let's do this. Let's log a warning. So we'll do log.warning unable to initialize Google Earth Engine. Have you set up credentials? This will just remind us of what's going on later on. And more importantly, it doesn't raise an exception, it just will log a warning, so the app should be able to load. So I'll go ahead and save these changes, and then let's try running the Tethys install command again. Okay, and this is more what we expected. So it loaded the Earth Engine app, and then it recognized that there were some app settings there. And so by default, the Tethys install command will launch into this interactive mode where you can define the values for these settings. So I'll go ahead and copy in the email for the service account. There. and then it's asking us for the value of the private key file. So we just need to put the path to that file, which we put into the Tethys home directory, and we renamed it GEE key. Great, and configuration was finished. The next thing that we need to do is we need to change the ownership of the static and workspace directories, and then collect all of the static and workspace files from the app into those directories. So to change the ownership, we could run this command, or these commands rather. Oh, and it pasted the second one in there, so there's the first one. Remember this, you're changing it to the active user, workspaces, and static files, and we're doing it recursively. Alternatively, if you set up the shortcuts, you can run Tethys user own or simply 2.0. Okay, so once we're owning those directories, we can now run Tethys manage collect all, which will run collect static and collect workspaces. And you can see that it links the public directory for the app. We'll go ahead and type yes here. That's for the workspace is what it's doing, is linking that. And then it's going to copy the static files over. Okay, and the last thing to do is to run Tethys server own, or change the permissions back. So let me do the verbose version of that first. So you could do this, and then the same thing on workspaces, or you could simply run Tethys server own or TSO. Let's just list that directory to verify. Okay, yeah. Static and workspaces are owned by Nginx now. Finally, we need to restart our server.